Probably all of us have things in our background that we're unaware of. Recently, I found out that I'm a descendant of a person who came over on the Mayflower, and that's not anything I had ever expected or even hoped for. Apparently, there are many people who would like to have a Pilgrim father for an ancestor. I'd never considered it, but my cousin told me I was descended from John Mullins. He was showing me the passenger list of the Mayflower. And then he was telling me at the same time that the Pilgrim Fathers were Sabbath keepers. And pieces in the family started fitting together. And I noticed that in my own family you can illustrate much of the history of Sabbatarianism, not only in America, but in its antecedents in the Middle East and in Europe as well. So I thought I'd just sit back and tell about my own family and where they came from and why, and give some stories, the details and documentation of which you can find in the papers that are being put out on the subject. John Mullins, that came over on the Mayflower, was a Sabbatarian, kept the Seventh-day Sabbath, and my great-grandfather was William Mullins, descended from him, and he was also a Sabbatarian. Didn't belong to any church, but he kept the Sabbath all of his life. And there's a whole long line of Sabbatarians there, and when you go to the other side of the family, you find the McElwains, and that's a name that is known at least from the 10th century as being the Celtic form Mac Gilla Vine. Gilla is servant and vine is white, and that is in reference to the people who refused to accept the Roman religion when it was forced on Ireland, and it's in reference to the old Celtic practice of dressing in white. So there you have several strands, and we'll find even more as we go on. It's generally thought that the first Sabbath-keeping church in what is now the United States was the Seventh-day Baptist Church that was founded around Stephen Mumford, who came to America from the Bell Lane Church in London, joined the Baptist Church in Newport, started talking about the Seventh-day Sabbath, and got a lot of sympathy among the members and a lot of hostility from the elders. And so in, I believe, 1671, the first Seventh-day Baptist Church was formed. But as we've already pointed out, there were Sabbath-keeping people in America a good long generation before that, 2 generations actually, 50 years earlier, we find Sabbatarians in what is now the United States. The Seventh-day Baptist churches coming from Bell Lane, the first church in London was actually the first church called Seventh-day Baptist or Sabbatarian Baptist was the Millyard Church, long thought to be developed or descended from the Traskite Church from 1617. John Trask was preaching for a very short time in London. He was not at first Sabbatarian, but he began keeping the Sabbath and gathered a church about him. There is some question about whether or not it was actually a Baptist church, but he was quite soon jailed along with his wife. The church was apparently scattered, and the movement probably died. Mistress Trask was in prison for 12 years and finally died there. It is said that the lines, the famous lines, were written about her, stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage. But she died for her faithfulness to the Sabbath. The Millyard Church came up a number of years later, more likely not from the Traskite group, but from the old Celtic house churches. An older Seventh-day Baptist church was probably that in present-day Tewkesbury. Tewkesbury is in Leicestershire, over by the Welsh border, and we have all of these house churches in Wales, Ireland, and Scotland through the centuries, hidden away. And when the urbanization took place, people went to London. They finally gathered there in the interregnum period, that is during Cromwell's time, and the Seventh-day Baptist Church was formed. Millyard Church was a very interesting church from many points of view. It was a general Baptist church, that is, they taught universal grace, the salvation of all. They were Sabbatarian, keeping the Sabbath. They sang no hymns or psalms. They did not sing in worship at all. They also kept, apparently, at least part of the time, the annual feasts. They were also a part of the Fifth Monarchy. This was a radical movement that was teaching that the image in Daniel 2, the stone would strike the feet, and the Fifth Monarchy would fill the world as the stone became a mountain and filled the world. And this is the Messianic kingdom, the millennium on earth. And they were waiting for this. John James was a fervent preacher of this message. He was dragged from the pulpit one Sabbath day after the Restoration. King Charles felt that the Fifth Monarchy was a threat to the throne, and perhaps for good reason, because John James, the Seventh-day Baptist, the Millyard Church, was affected by the synagogue in Amsterdam, for one thing, and through the synagogue in Amsterdam and perhaps other sources, were influenced by the Sabtai Tzvi movement, the Jewish Messiah, called the false Messiah. And these people were waiting for a real kingdom of God on earth. So the king may have been right to feel that the throne was actually threatened. And of course this was a church that was a product, very much a product, of the Cromwellian period. So the suspicion attached to it was not unfounded. Because of this suspicion, we have another church arising, the Pinners Hall Church, called Calvinist, Particular Baptist. This arose after the Restoration, probably by people, founded by people who wanted to escape the suspicion that joining the Millyard Church would place on them. And so they founded the Pinners Hall Church, which was Particular Baptist. They did not teach universal grace or the salvation of all, but they did keep the Sabbath, and they also apparently were a modified or moderate Unitarian stand as well, because if you read carefully in Francis Bampfield's book All in One, in which, by the way, he proposes Hebrew education for all of England instead of Latin and Greek-based education, and the Stennett family, which produced many of the pastors of the Bell Lane Church and the Pinners Hall Church, were brought up in this kind of education based on Hebrew. In this book, he presents Christ as subordinate, although he strongly emphasizes the pre-existence of Christ, and that